By the time we get done with you in this department, you should be ready to step into the industry, go to an audition, and be able to compete.
Today, I'm very lucky to have the opportunity to interview Mr. Lee Lobenhofer.
Hello.
Laguardia drama teacher, about to start his 22nd year.
23rd.
23rd
Yeah,
year?
2000 was my first year.
23rd year.
Yeah, well, however they measure it. But yeah, I came in September of 2000.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Before we talk about LaGuardia, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
So could you please walk us through your background and career experiences you've had that have helped build you into the wonderful and beloved LaGuardia teacher you are today?
Well, that's debatable. Talk to some other students, they may doubt that, but I appreciate that. I grew up outside of Chicago, northwest suburb of Chicago, Arlington Heights. Did not go to an art school, but I had a teacher there. Early on, I was a jock, I was this, I was that, trying to find myself. Didn't really know where my life was supposed to be. My parents were in community theater. Both my sisters were active in it, but I was sort of ostracized from all of that stuff. And then what was interesting was that they all went in different directions, and I kind of fell into the theater. And had no experience, no training. Halfway through my junior year of high school, somebody came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to be in a show?" And I was like, I was on the football team at the time, and I was pretty strong. And I said, "No, why would I want to do it?" They said, "You get to lift pretty girls in tights and have fun." And I said, "Oh, pretty girls in tights? Yeah, sure, okay." So I did my first show there, and that was just sort of experimental fun. And then they invited me to do the next show in high school later that same year. And I was like, all of a sudden, hey, this is really fun. I kind of like this. So by my senior year, I had fallen in love with it. And then, obviously, Chicago suburb, not exactly diverse population. I got to play Tevye in Fiddler. Completely interesting casting. But I was doing the show, and I was singing a song called Chavala. And it's such a moving song. And I was transported into this world. And also at the same time, the audience was transported into this world. And we had this shared moment where I'm crying and they're crying. And it was just a beautiful moment. And I said, this is incredible. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that's when I shifted and really found my trajectory in life. Now, during that time, there was a woman there, Patricia Lukowitz, who was the drama teacher. But nobody called her Mrs. Lukowitz. Everybody called her Mrs. L. So we all loved Mrs. L, and she was so motivating and so insightful. And a lot of people went on from this just general public high school and went on and did important things. So skip a couple of decades, and all of a sudden I came here, and they said, "Okay, what do you want us to call you, Mr. Lobenhofer?" And I went, "No, I know how important Mrs. L was to me as a teacher. She basically guided me into my life path and my choice. And in her honor, I'll become Mr. L." So that's how I became Mr. L.
Whoa, that's really cool.
Yeah, that was fun. But then from then, I wanted to go to college and I wanted to study the theater. And my parents said, "You can't make any money in the theater. No, we won't pay for a theater education. Do something that you can make money in." And I was like, "Okay, well, what would be close to theater?" So I got a speech education degree. Education. And so the speech degree was great. It really informed me about speech and all of that stuff. And I had an English minor, so literature was very much of a part of my life as well. But at the same time, they didn't really know in the theater department, I kept infiltrating. And I was auditing classes and taking classes and auditioning for their shows. And my sophomore year, I got the lead in a thing called Tijan and His Brothers. And it was a great show that was in the theater department. And from then on, they forgot the fact that I wasn't a drama major. So I was auditioning and doing shows in the theater department. So I basically had an unofficial double major. And then I was also taking a lot of dance classes and performing in dance concerts. So then I had an unofficial double minor at the same time.
Cool.
So at the end of all of that, I had this great opportunity to learn, but also the education degree came in handy when I came here because I had already taken all of the education classes and I got the certification. So that, decades later became very important into my life. But I graduated and I looked in a mirror hard, and I recommend this to all my students and anybody that is looking to become an actor. And I looked at myself in the mirror realistically and I said, are you ready to face the world and the competition of the profession? And I realistically looked and said, no, I'm not. So then when I got my MFA in acting, and that my parents didn't have to pay for, I paid for. I was a teaching assistant because I had my teaching degree. I could be a teaching assistant the first year. And then because of the dance, and I had also performed in kabuki, studied kabuki for 6 years, done some opera, as well as the shows, whether they be musicals or straight shows throughout the school. So I'd done all of this stuff. So then by my second year of my MFA, they offered me a performing arts fellowship. So they basically paid me to come to school, and that was a real godsend, because then I didn't have to do all these odd jobs to try to pay for everything. Instead, I could just focus on the work. So I graduated from that and auditioned for something just before the summer of this is going to show my age, but I graduated in '79 with my master's. And just before I graduated, I got this job in Colorado Springs, the Troupe Repertory Theater, my first professional gig. And the other good thing about it was my girlfriend at the time was also cast in it. So the two of us got to go to Colorado Springs for the summer and do our first professional experiences together. So that was a really nice transition into the world, because we did 4 shows, and I was lucky enough to do the leads in all 4 shows. So that was my baptism by fire into the professional world. And then from there I went to Chicago. I said, do I go to LA for movies? Do I go to New York for Broadway? And I went, no, not ready yet. So I went to Chicago, which is where I grew up. And they have a fabulous theater community in Chicago too. Great theater being done there. So I started there and did a couple of shows early on. And then within about 6 months of being in Chicago, I got a thing called Do Black Patent Leather Shoes Really Reflect Up, which was my first equity gig, the union gig. And that moved me into the union profession and started doing union jobs. So for 2 years, I was in Chicago doing professional jobs. And it was great, but there's not really the room for growth. I had already kind of gone as far as you could in Chicago, and I could have stayed there and been happy, but there was no real further growth involved. And so that's when I decided to come to New York and pack my bags, found a sublet, and knew no one, got here, looked around, and just said, okay, this is what it's like to be a starving young actor in New York. You have no money, no real anything except that your talents and a couple of credits from Chicago, but nothing New York. So started with doing a little bit of children's theater tours and but pretty quickly worked my way up into doing regional theaters, some nice regional theater work, and got a chance to work at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis and St. Louis Rep and Williamstown Theater Festival and Kennedy Center and places like that. So I was really getting a chance to work all around, and then all of a sudden, I got this opportunity to do a show called I Married an Angel, which was listed as a Broadway show. It was at Town Hall, but it was great with really good people here in the city. And I was the second lead in that. I was doing that, and that was my first real introduction to working in the city. And then from then on, I was lucky continually working, either doing national tours. I did national tour of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which is the Canadian cast with Donny Osmond. So that's singing a country western song sounding like this. And of all the musicals that I've sung in, that's the only one that we did a cast album with. So the only thing that you can really hear me in on a cast album is me singing like this. So yeah, well, it's like, can I hear you sing? Well, sort of, not really. But I did that, and I did Cats, the national tour. The good thing about that one was I was in Cats for a year on the road, which was fabulous. I really, really enjoyed it. And then an opening came to do it in the city. And so then I moved, and I did it on Broadway for a year. What else? I did Who's Afraid of... A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum on Broadway. When Whoopi Goldberg took over for Nathan Lane, I came in with Whoopi and did that for a while. I did Grand Hotel on Broadway for a year. I was hired as the standby for the Baron, which means you're in the wings waiting for him to get sick or go on vacation before you take over the role. So I was there, and then they said, well, why don't you cover this role too? I said, okay, good. So then I was covering 2, and then all of a sudden, every week I was learning a new role. So I covered 9 different characters in Grand Hotel on Broadway, and I performed and went on for 8 out of the 9. So that was fun. What else? Oh, and then I did a thing we lovingly call Shogun, but it was Shogun the musical. We did that, went through all of the workshop process of developing it, performed it at the Kennedy Center, and then they came and we basically inaugurated the Marriott Marquis Theater on Broadway. So I did that too. So I've been in 5 Broadway shows, a bunch of national tours, all around the country in different regional theaters or in the tours, as well as Canada. Spent about 2.5 years up in Canada performing. So then I had kids. And my daughter was born while I was doing Joseph. And I realized that I was up in Vancouver in a show that was selling out everywhere. It was really warmly received. I was making more money than I'd ever made as an actor, and I was miserable because I was missing my daughter's first steps and all of these things about being a father. So then I decided that more than an actor, I want to be a good father. So I decided that I would put a limitation on things. I would only do six weeks out of town, then I have to be back so that I can be there. So I was doing a show at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, and it was called Paramore, and it was written by the same guy who wrote Cabaret. It was a brand new show. Len Cariou, who was the original Sweeney Todd, was the lead of it, and we were supposed to come in, and we thought we were going to come in, and we were only there for 6 weeks, and then we were going to come in, and I was still miserable. I said, I want to be with my kids. I want to see them grow up. So then when that closed, one more time, I auditioned for this thing. It was Last of the Mohicans, a musical version of Last of the Mohicans. And I got cast as one of the leads in that, and it was going to be in Toronto, and it was either going to play Toronto and then come to New York, or Toronto and go to West End, and I had never played West End, so either way, it was good. So I went to do that, or I was going to go and do that, and they had, first day of rehearsals was with the chorus, and the principals were supposed to come the next day. That night, before I took the train to Toronto, they called me and they said, we lost all of our funding because of the stock market. We're canceling the show. So forget it. Sorry, we took your time. So it was the beginning of the summer. Everything had already been cast. I had nothing lined up performance-wise. And I said, I've been wanting to do this for a long time because of my kids. I said, maybe this is the time to make the transition. And a friend of mine was teaching in a small school in East Harlem. And he said, put together a resume. I'll bring it to my principal. So I scratched together this really crummy resume, gave it to him. And I said, what the heck? As long as I'm doing it, I'll make a copy. I made a copy of this really crummy resume, walked to the front of this building, handed it to the security guard and said, can you get this to the drama department? And they said yes. And I went home, and by the time I got home, Linda Masson, who was the AP of drama at the time, called and left a message, can you call me back? We talked, hit it up for an interview process and all of that stuff. And why, I have no idea, but they offered me the job. And so I fell into it so accidentally and undeservedly, frankly. But it was just, thank you for stepping in and guiding my life from what I loved to do, which is the theater, to what I love to do, which is the theater, but sharing it with the community for the next generation. So everything that it gave me, now I get to share it with the next generation. And that's been so fulfilling. Never looked back, never felt like, oh, I wish I was still performing. I'm so glad that I'm here. So that's a long story to get me here.
That's great. And the rest is history.
Yeah, but the rest is long days and lots of work, but loving every minute of it.
Fantastic. So, for listeners who might not know what actually happens in the drama department, could you please give us a brief description of the program, both its philosophy and its execution? What are your educational goals, and what does a day in the life of a LaGuardia drama teacher and his students look like?
That's the interesting thing about LaGuardia, because there was performing arts and then there was music and art. Performing arts was a vocational school. Music and art was a preparational for college, an enrichment school. Two different goals. One, vocational, the performing arts, which was drama, is by the time you get done with our training here, you're ready to step into the industry. Whereas music and art was, we're going to give you great training, and by the time we get done here, you're going to have such a leg up on your college education. So one was college preparatory, and one was industry preparatory. The drama department is still that, in my mind anyways, and it has been. It was vocational, actual vocational. Many years back, I won an award as Vocational Teacher of the Year because we were a vocational program. We are no longer an officially vocational program, but I still feel the philosophy is vocational. By the time we get done with you in this department, you should be ready to step into the industry, go to an audition, and be able to compete. Now, a lot of our kids continue their education, go to college, which is great. Some of them go and get a BFA in acting to continue their acting training. Great. Other people say, I've got that under my belt. Now I want to go and get philosophy or anthropology or history or anything like that, which gives them a well-roundedness, because actors need to be well-informed and well-rounded, not just, I'm a good actor, but I'm a good actor who can represent life because I know life. So that's what we're trying to do, is prepare these kids by the time they graduate to be able to step into the industry and compete so that they can actually make a living. We're not doing this for ourselves. When I direct a show here, which I've sort of translated into being a director here from an actor, and being so grateful to be able to have directed a lot of things. But every time I direct something, I need to have a strong feeling. I'm hitting the mic, I'm probably popping all over. Hopefully not. I have to have a strong feeling about what I have to say about the show. But the most important thing is, are we representing and showcasing the kids? Are the kids getting a chance to really show what they've learned and grow from the process? So it's not about me. It's not about my successes as a director. It's about the kids, the children, because I still think of them as children even though they're young adults. Their successes and possibilities that come from that, because the industry has awakened to the fact that LaGuardia is the breeding ground of the next stars. So, they found out with Timmy and Ansel and Zazie Beetz and, so many different people that came out here and are doing amazing things in the industry. It's like, wait a minute, the industry says we can get in on the ground floor of that. So they come to see our shows. So all of our shows, whether it be the industry showcase that we do at the end of senior year in drama, which is only the industry comes in and the kids get to basically audition for the industry. But they also know about our shows, the musicals, the SDFs, the Rising Stars. So many people have gotten representation because of being in shows here. So the industry looks at us as the breeding grounds of greatness. So that's where we're trying to send them into that. When they graduate here, they need to be ready to compete on that level.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. And it takes 4 years. A lot of people say, well, maybe we can add this and maybe we can add that. But everything we add to the program takes time away from the ultimate goal, which is creating actors. Actors who really understand how to be an actor and how to create roles and how to create performances and all of that stuff it doesn't happen overnight. And it takes 4 years to really achieve that sense of now I come. It's like when I graduated college and I looked in the mirror and I said, I'm not ready yet. It takes 4 years for them to get there, look in the mirror and say, now I'm ready.
Great. Do you think they're ready?
Most of them, yes. Some of them, some of them were like me. It's like, no, they needed to go on and continue because everybody works at their own pace. But some of them, Jarrell Jerome, who was my son's best friend. Jarrell Jerome graduated here, went to Ithaca for 1 semester, and the industry called him and snatched him up, and then he became an Emmy Award winner. So it was like, okay, his path was that. He wasn't supposed to go to college. He'll do college whenever it happens. Some people, one of my co-directors for Rising Stars got her undergraduate degree in her 40s or 50s and then continued on. So we never stopped learning and being hungry for education. But a degree doesn't make the difference. The education makes the difference. So if you can go and get your education on set, great. Why go and study something if you can go and do it and learn it in the reality world? And then later on, if you want to go back and get a philosophy degree or whatever it is, you can do that at any time in your life. So some of them, they're ready now. Some of them, they may not be. I think training-wise, they're ready now, but sometimes it's an emotional thing. I need to go through that college experience and realize my freedom that I have away from home and all of that. So I have to deal with that before I'm ready for that. So everybody has their own path, and we support whatever path they take.
Always learning. I love the fact that you've been at LaGuardia longer than your current students have been alive.
That was painful the first time. The first time, it was like teaching freshmen, and it's like, okay, when were you born? 2000. You never knew 19 anything? No, I was born in 2000. Now it's like, oh my God. Yeah, I've gone from, well, I could be your dad to, I could be your grandfather. And some of them I'm feeling like, I could be your great-grandfather. But yeah, it was a wake-up call. But it's great because it keeps me young, keeps me connected to the youth of today as opposed to just living off. My wife teaches preschool. So both of us are so connected into the youth that a lot of our friends that have gone on and they're in, the little communities and all that, doing all that stuff, it's like, no, we're still living that vibrancy of youth, and we want to hold that as long as we can.
Could you please share your general observations regarding what has stayed the same, was changed over the past 2 decades? How has the school changed? How have the kids changed? Have they changed?
Yes, they've changed. School has changed. It's almost cyclical. For a while there, we had a principal that was focused more on academics, and now we're back into the arts focus, which is great because it's an art school. It's not Stuyvesant Light. We are the preeminent art school in the city, potentially the country, and potentially even the world. I've had students that have gone and auditioned in Europe, and they look at the resume and they say, oh, you went to LaGuardia? Oh, so, it carries weight. But it has changed at times, and we want to make sure that it stays the preeminent art school. Kids have changed and you're not going to want to hear this, but the element of entitlement. A lot of the kids come in and it's like, well, I'm entitled to this and I'm entitled to that. Well, and unfortunately, parents, and I'm one of them, both my kids went here. One is a dance major, one is a drama major. But I tried to not be the helicopter parent and not be the parent that says, oh, my kid could never be wrong. It's got to be everybody else. The entitlement has made it so some of the kids are not willing to throw themselves into things as completely, and also they feel like they're deserving of something. And I get that, except for the fact that when you step out into the real world, that does not exist. So it becomes a disservice to the kids to say, no, you get this, you get this. It's like the medals and the trophies for everybody who participated. Yeah. It's like that's great. I understand we're trying to protect self-esteem and all that, and I work really, really hard at that. But at the same time, they have to have the realities of life of saying sometimes you don't win. That's why in our department, we do final scenes at the end of every semester, and everybody gets a leading role. The scenes are always 2-person scenes or 3-person scenes. Everybody's got big meaty parts. Even in a 1-act senior year, everybody is equally represented, but come SDF, and the same thing happens in the all-school musical. It's like, now it's real world. Now I might want Sky Masterson and Guys and Dolls, and I'm going to go for that. I didn't get Sky Masterson and Guys and Dolls. I might have gotten Benny South Street, or I might have gotten In the Chorus, or whatever. I'm happy to be in whatever, and that actually happened to me. I was in the chorus at the Guthrie of Guys and Dolls. I wanted to be Sky Masterson, but I didn't get it. So I was happy to get the chorus. And then something happened, and I ended up being moved up to Benny South Street. And it was like, great, okay. And then I even ended up playing a different role in the thing. So it was, I am going to love whatever it is that I get, and I'm going to put my all into it. So that, self-esteem, I think, is built by the pride that you take in the work, not the work that you get. So it's Stephen Sondheim says, love what you do. It's not necessary to do what you love, but love what you do. So whatever it is that's been thrown my way, whether it be subsistence jobs, just making a living in order to get to my next audition, or whether it be roles that I've gotten that I wanted that one, but I got this one, I'm going to give it my all and love every bit of it. So.
Could you describe the ways in which you've had to adapt your program during the restrictions, but also maybe share something unexpectedly positive that came out of the situation?
Oh, yeah. I think COVID was a real eye-opener, for me especially, because I'm of a generation that did not grow up with computers. So I had to learn so much stuff. Now, give me a Zoom, I got it. You need a waiting room, we got it all. So I learned so much from that technologically. But also, it was really nice to be able to have some intimate moments on screen with somebody. It's like, okay, now I can go into not a waiting room, but some of the side rooms. We break it off, and I can work one-on-one with people rather than in a large situation with 30 people in a classroom. Instead, I can work a scene with just 2 people, and the intimacy of that connection into the scene was really, really nice. Our kids also are comfortable in front of a camera now, which the industry has changed. It used to be, when I was in it, you'd go in and I would do 5, 6 auditions a day. And I'd have to run here and run there, and they were all live. Nowadays, it's all self-tapes, almost all of it. And so our kids are really comfortable in front of a camera now. The drawback to that was for a year and a half, 2 years, they were completely playing into the camera over here. Then all of a sudden we all came back here, and they got on stage and they were completely playing right to the camera. It was like, no, now we have to relearn how to bring it out to the audiences. So we were always striving, because that's also how the department has changed. We didn't have any musical theater in the drama department at all. And then Sandy Faison came in and embraced it. And I love musical theater. Most of my career was in musical theater. So we expanded into embracing more musical theater training, but also film and television. That's the wave of so many opportunities are out there in film and television. So we tried to get more experience on camera. Well, COVID gave us lots of experience on camera, and the kids are really more adept and comfortable in front of a camera. So that's been great with it too. So now the important thing for us, and I'm learning this and trying to remind myself of this, is don't lose the lessons that you learned during COVID simply because we're not all on Zoom anymore. Take advantage of the fact that, okay, the building is closed for this holiday or anything, but I've got the kids reaching out and they want coaching on this or what. Okay, let's do a Zoom session. And we can coach through that, because I've learned that you can teach on Zoom. It's a little bit more difficult, but you can. I was teaching theater movement, and I taught kids how to juggle on Zoom. So if you can teach people to juggle on Zoom, you can expand it into other things and really utilize the technology.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
And there's a saying that I like, and it's, the world is made of stories, not just atoms. Could you please share a personal story about your experience here at LaGuardia? Something you treasure about your experience at the school, or something that no one else knows about you? No one knows but you.
My first, I was thinking about this because I saw this question coming up, and I said, there's so many. Over this many years, obviously, I've got lots of fabulous memories and stories. But my first year here, I was teaching seniors, and a senior boy, I won't mention his name, but he was having a really hard time. And one time after class, he stuck around and he said, "Can we talk?" He said, "Can we talk?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What's going on? What's going on?" And he broke down and fell apart on my shoulder, sobbing into my shoulder. And he was basically having an emotional breakdown right there because of things that were going on in his life. And he just needed somebody to listen and somebody to cry on their shoulder. And I was happy to be there. But I was also realizing that teaching is not just teaching subjects. Teaching is reaching out to people, making them better people. I want to make great actors, but my higher priority is making great people. And by being there for him and then realize that, and then we teach is the adding on that we always say, yeah, we do this, and then we teach. Teaching is really important, and it is a brilliantly, I feel so honored, and it's a profession that it needs to be taken seriously, but also there's a huge responsibility that goes along with it. And I realized that Mrs. L changed my life. Every time I have an interplay with any of my students, I don't know what seeds I'm sowing because they may blossom years from now, but I might change their life. And I can change it and grow flowers, or I can change it and grow weeds. So it's up to me to make sure that I take very seriously how I interact with students and that I'm compassionate and loving, as well as giving of my information, but also giving my heart. And he taught me that. That first year here, I said, okay, this is going to be a lot more than just me imparting information. This is going to be me being available for hundreds of kids so that I can be there for them. And it was that boy that gave me that.
That's great. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, okay, spicy. Now it's time for the speed round.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions.
Yep.
Number one, did you know you wanted to be an actor when you were in high school?
After junior year.
Excellent. If not, what other interests did you have?
Animals. My son, who went here in drama, was on Broadway at age 10 in Gypsy with Patti LuPone. So I always wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. I wanted to be out there working with animals and all that until I found theater. And then I fell into theater. He fell into theater at a very young age, loved theater and everything, and then we had always talked about animals. Now he's in Cape Town getting his master's in conservation biology, working with animals and so we reversed paths. I would have loved, and now if I retire, I told him I want to be your driver. I'll just drive around in the Jeep out on the plains of Africa and spot animals with you. So I would have been doing what he's doing.
Nice. Is there a different LaGuardia division that you would have considered auditioning for when you were a teen?
Singing was always scary for me. It still is. Give me a character to hide behind. I can sing for days. If it's just me singing, I'm just like I said. So not vocal. Instrumental, I played trumpet in junior high, but I wasn't very good at it, so no. But I always loved dance. So I would have been potentially, fulfilled by being a dance major. Because I feel like dancing is acting through just a different physical form.
Right. That's, I think, first. Never heard anyone talk about dance. That's great. Please name one of your favorite films when you were a high school student and share why you loved it.
Again, it's like, do I like my daughter or my son best? But there was one movie that taught me a lot and I loved and I was obsessed with for a while, and it was 2001: A Space Odyssey. Back then. Yeah, I'm old, I know. But there's so much symbolism, and there's so much, Stanley Kubrick is doing so much stuff. It's like, what is it? I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm going, oh. And all of a sudden, after watching it many times, I went, I understand this movie. I know exactly what all the symbolism is and what the story is that he's telling. And then they did a special interview with him about what he was trying to say and everything. And it was nothing at all like I had thought. And I realized it doesn't matter. That was his movie that he made, but we see movies through our own eyes and interpret it our own ways. So it taught me a lot that it's like, okay, I'm going to throw out there a piece of art. And this is how I interpret it. But everybody's going to interpret it differently how they see it. So that was one of my favorite movies, and it also taught me a huge lesson.
Acting.
Yeah.
What was your favorite Broadway show when you were in high school? Why did it speak to you?
Well, good question, because I was in Chicago. I never went to Broadway until afterwards, but tours and things that came around, so many of them. Anne of La Mancha was huge for me, for a variety of different reasons. Just the impossible dream part of it, that was huge. Once I got to New York and actually saw Broadway shows, it was like, okay, that's my favorite. No, that's my favorite. No, but now if anybody asks me, probably Sunday in the Park with George is my favorite because it speaks to the soul of an actor.
If you had one piece of advice to current LaGuardia students, what would it be?
Never fake it and never mark. Always give it your full account. Everything that you have that day, give 100%. Now, I try to tell this to my students at the time. Today, this is my 100%. Over the nighttime, I get the flu, and so I'm throwing up in the thing, and I'm still performing, but I'm running off stage, and I'm throwing up. This is my 100%. It's still 100%. It's just not as big as it was the first day because life happens. But never give less than 100% because you don't know who's in the audience. You don't know what's going to come from these opportunities. But also, the best way to maintain self-esteem and your self-image is to never shortchange what you do. Instead, always give 100%, and you can always feel good about yourself.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, this was incredible. Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Mr. Lobenhofer.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
You've played an immense, important role in LaGuardia's story.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate your willingness to be the first interview.
I feel honored to be the first interview, and I appreciate you asking me to do this.